Hello and welcome back to Youth in Politics. I'm Justin Schnitt, and once again I'm joined with Republican gubernatorial candidate Matt Jacobson. Let's continue our conversation with tax reform.
Sure.
What specifically will you do as governor to fix what you call an outdated tax code?
First of all, we need to not tax work, okay? The more you tax something, the less you get of it. We're running that experiment with cigarettes. You know, on the one hand, we want everybody to stop smoking for all the obvious reasons. But on the other hand, if everybody stopped smoking, the dome would collapse because we need the money. So we need to make sure that we focus our taxes not on the things that we want to go away. Tourists, we don't want them to go away. We'd like them to come. We also have the philosophy that we ought to pay for the government we have. And we get tourists to help us pay for that, fine. But we ought to focus the government, the type and size of government, on what we can afford. We also got to look really hard at reforming how we spend. But look, you know, they talked about some of the issues we have in reducing the income tax. Well, look, we have very, very wealthy people leaving Maine, the wrong people leaving Maine, because we lose their taxes, we lose their charity, and we're left with people who aren't as wealthy and still have the needs. So we need to figure out why are those folks leaving. We have a very high inheritance tax. We need to fix that. We need to reduce or eliminate income taxes. Certainly we have to get to way more competitive than 6%. The best states in the country have zero. I know you spent some time in Florida. They don't have an income tax. Other states, other countries are like that. We need to look really hard at that. And certainly sales tax, if you tie it to significant tax decreases in other places, become a lot more politically powerful and easier to implement. Certainly property tax as well. But we've got to start with spending. This notion that we can change our tax code and then see what that brings us from a revenue perspective and then change our spending habits, I think is backwards. I think we got to focus on the spending, and we got to focus our taxes on those companies that will create the kind of responsible jobs that we'd like to have here.
Will you promise right here that you will veto any increase in government spending until everything is taken care of in terms of our reforming our tax code? And
look, we spend enough money. Let me give you a great example. Tupelo, Mississippi, about 2 years ago, Toyota announced a $1.2 billion factory. They're going to build a Prius there. And so I called the guy because I was very interested. How Tupelo, Mississippi? I mean, how did they beat us? How did they beat anyone? And he said it was three things. It was environmental standards, it was business climate, and it was educated workforce. And I was surprised to hear that. And I said, well, tell me about environmental standards. He says, we were the only city that would raise our standards to meet Toyota's, because they're doing the Prius there, and they were interested in that marketing campaign where we're green, and they were going to force wherever they went to at least adopt their standards, which I thought was an interesting, you can have high standards and attract good companies. So that was great. The second thing was business climate. And I said, well, tell me about how you define that. He said, well, we needed a $300 million bond package to finish the deal. We passed it unanimously in 15 minutes. I thought, wow, that's business climate, a demonstration. We want you here and we want you to create jobs. But here was the kicker. I said, well, tell me about educated workforce. And he says, well, that was the beauty of the bond package. Not one dime went to Toyota. We needed some money for the community college to train the workers in the plant. So that there's some money went to that big chunk. We needed an R&D facility, so Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, got a lean manufacturing R&D center right in the university. And we had to do some infrastructure work, roads, bridges, railroads, telecom, and we had to grub the land. All in, about $300 million. I thought it was pretty amazing. A week and a half later, our last bond package came out, $300 million. There was money for community colleges, there was money for R&D, there was money for infrastructure. We did everything but grub the land. What did we get for it? I tell you what we got. We got whooped by Tupelo, and Tupelo got 10,000 jobs. We spend enough money. We spend more than enough money. But our focus needs to be relentless on increasing efficiency and increasing excellence in customer service. If we focus on those things like every business in Maine does every day, if we take that attitude to state government, we can cut costs out and deliver better service. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Talking about businesses, you say that your administration will be charged with reducing the unnecessary or redundant regulatory burdens placed on Maine businesses. What are those, and why is it important to eliminate them?
Perfect example is Poland Spring, and we talk about that on the website as well. Here's a company that over the last 10 years has invested $1 billion in Maine, nearly, 800 high-paying jobs with benefits in areas like Kingfield that need the work. Every place in Maine needs the work. Clearly, we need more opportunity, not less. And yet, we have this whole group of people that want to let them not take water. Well, after all this rain this spring, I'd pay them to take water out of my basement, for crying out loud. That is an area where the science is clear. We're not hurting Maine. We're not hurting our infrastructure. And yet, we're trying to put all these barriers. I think in a broader sense, for some reason, our regulatory practice has gone from helping you comply with the regulation and get in compliance to using it as a club to stop any kind of development. We can't stop development. We have to create jobs. The result of that is people in your age group are leaving the state in droves. Our 18 to 34 demographic is decimated, and it's shrinking faster than any other state in the country because of lack of opportunity and jobs. And we're using our regulatory burden not to help companies get into compliance and do the kinds of responsible things that we'd like them to do, but as a club. Now, if they willfully violate a regulation, there ought to be no sympathy, and we'll go after those folks. But we ought to use the regulator to help folks get to a point where they can create opportunities in the kind of responsible manner that we want, rather than using it as a club to stop them developing anything.
As governor, are there any programs or services that you can see right now that we can make cutbacks in terms of trying to reduce spending?
Well, I can think of a few, but the first one is Diriga. I'd stop it right now. It's a 2.5% tax on everybody. It's by any measure, a failed program. Why we entertain it, I have no idea. I'd stop that day one.
With that, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back on Youth in Politics. Don't go away.